Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start our video with a story in which the OP outsmarted people who wanted to force them to subscribe to a useless antivirus. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. How to screw an antivirus company who's actually screwing you by spreading virus, malware. There used to be an antivirus company which gave big discounts on electronics over at Tiger Direct, Amazon, etc. They sold it as a bundled item with hardware like memory, SSD, hard drive, etc. I mean, $70 mail-in rebate on a hard drive so I could get a 1 terabyte drive for $20. Seemed too good to be true, so I did some research. Turns out they're not antivirus, they're worse than a virus. They basically took over your computer. Pop-up ads on the taskbar, your homepage gets changed, they filter out ads from websites and insert their own ads, they install a root certificate on Windows, so now they can monitor your secure SSL TLS connection to websites. I'm talking about monitoring your transaction with your bank. It was a nasty malware. To top it off, they enroll you in a subscription plan, $79 a year. They just hope you forget to cancel. So in a year, they make up the discount they gave you and continue to charge you every year. Amazon customers were complaining, canceling is almost impossible, and it's impossible to remove the program completely once you install it. The only option is to rebuild Windows from scratch. So I thought, I'll get the program, just won't install it. Wrong. Here's the process to get the rebate. You get the program on a CD, you install it on your computer. During the install, you have to give your credit card number, phone number, email, and physical address. So basically, they've got you by the balls at that point. Then the program contacts their server so they can verify you did install the program. Then they send you the rebate form to your email, which you print out and send back to them. Then they'll mail you an Amex gift card. I know this because my poor friend did all that. I spent hours rebuilding his laptop. So how to F these people who are trying to F you? Install a virtual machine software like VirtualBox. Create a virtual machine, which is a computer running inside your computer. They think they got access to your main computer and go hog wild with whatever they do. They can't tell. Meanwhile, your main computer remains unaffected. Use the virtual credit card feature of Citibank, Discover, or PayPal. Generate a virtual CC number with a credit limit of $5 and an expiry date 2 months from now. Create an email just for this purpose. I own many domains, so it's easy for me, or just use Hotmail, etc. Install the software on the VM, giving the virtual CC number, email, and fake phone number. Pro tip, in the US, any number with a 0 or 1 or 55 after the area code does not exist. Do the remaining steps. Once you get the gift card in the mail, use it immediately, delete or roll back the virtual machine, delete the email address. They were surprisingly prompt in sending the card. I got it within a week or two. Sell the hard drive back on eBay or Amazon at the current price. Profit. A year later, when they realize they can't charge my CC, ignore the letters they send you in the mail about how much they're worried about you and your computer because their servers can't contact your computer and they can't contact you. I must have done this a half a dozen times before they canceled the deal. And our second story. Doing what you were told and doing it well. I used to work for a company that was terrible about promising the moon and then dropping the responsibility on me to make it work. They promised customers features that nobody else in the industry offered, then they dump it in my lap and say, make it happen. I would indeed make it happen. Then the salesman who sold it would scream bloody murder over things taking twice as long to install as they budgeted for. You would think people would realize that custom work requires more time than just bolting things together and plugging it in. When you sell people things that don't exist yet, it takes a bit longer than the handy spreadsheet from corporate says it will. The extra install time ate into their commission, so most of them wised up and began consulting me before bidding a job with anything weird. One guy just never got the message. Unfortunately, he was also the boss at our branch. He did it over and over again without so much as a thank you. I did my job and took pride in it, but one day he had the temerity to complain to our parent company about my open disdain for their lack of quality. Not because I was saying it to customers, but because I was telling him to avoid selling certain types of equipment because we were literally losing customers because it was so bad. It was no surprise to corporate, as I was very vocal about their absolute lack of quality control. I'm talking about receiving stuff with components falling off the board because it hadn't been run through the wave soldering machine. Other things would come in with parts missing or a motor running backward, etc. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to my work, and this always upset and embarrassed me. This doesn't really add to the plot, other than to explain why I was absolutely disgusted with the company as a whole, and him in particular. He had just sold yet another real science project that involved field modifying our equipment to add a feature that it was never intended to have. I had to drop some adapters in CAD and send the file out to be laser cut by an outside company. Meanwhile, 6 different companies had equipment that had to be cajoled into playing nice with our stuff and with each other. Of course, on jobs like that, the final connections and making everything work together always gets overlooked when contracts are drawn up. You always end up with everyone arguing that they aren't responsible and trying to push as much of the work off onto everyone else as they can get away with. It quickly escalates up the chain of command. Well, this time was no different. When I called to get him involved, he texted me back saying he didn't have time to deal with it. He was heading out for a 3-week vacation that started that Friday and had more important things to do. A follow-up phone call resulted in harsh language and yelling on his part. In the end, all I could get out of him was, "I don't care how you do it, just make it happen." Normally, I'd have pushed the issue, but for once I didn't. I was on the verge of walking off the job after being overworked, putting up with far too much crap, and generally being embarrassed to be associated with what my employer had become. I'd had it. I really thought about quitting, but I had a better idea. I was working crazy hours anyway, and a lot of work from adjacent areas was being pushed off on me anyway, so I decided to make the best of it. I meekly did what I was told and made it happen. I never once slacked off, but let me tell you, after a month of 70-hour work weeks, those jobs had some of the best documentation and the prettiest wiring harnesses I've ever done. Nobody had to argue about a thing. Every time another company pawned their scope of work off on us, I made it happen. I documented my time meticulously, making sure every minute that belonged to that job was billed correctly. I even took the progress photos he was supposed to submit and submitted them. He never saw a dime of commission for that month. Failing to budget for 120 hours of overtime for skilled labor will kind of do that. 3 weeks of extra full-time work within a month? Not too shabby. Costing a crappy boss his commission? Great. And our last story. Good landlord versus bad landlord. Decisive victory. Background. I'm a real estate developer and investor, and I own, manage several mid-sized multifamily rental properties. I'm aggressive with rents, but I love the construction side of the business and take great pride in keeping my properties in excellent condition. I also ensure my staff provides top-notch customer service. I never understood why property managers don't have the same attitude towards customer service as hoteliers. Anyways, one of my friends lives in a building owned by a very traditional landlord. A grumpy old lady bangs on the door to collect rent every month. Things don't get fixed unless you threaten to file a dispute, and in general, everything is fixed as cheaply as possible. My friend called me last week and said her fire alarm had been going off since 3 a.m., not the fire alarm actually, but the warning tone on the annunciator panel. This is the device that receives inputs from heat detectors, smoke detectors, etc. all around the building and monitors and provides power and battery backup. This panel was apparently detecting a fault and sounding the warning tone. This isn't the fire alarm, but it sounds like a loud smoke detector going off. It cannot be silenced until it's serviced. In my buildings, they occasionally go off every few years, and as with everything else, my staff must attend within half hour, and in this case, appropriate action would be to call the fire safety contractor for an emergency service call. My friend's landlord informed her that the contractor had been called, but it was not an emergency, so they would be there in 4 days. 4 days of this alarm going off 24/7 constantly? No sleep for anyone? This was likely to avoid the overtime surcharge for an emergency service, or about $150. But the manager was kind enough to wrap the panel in several towels with packing tape to slightly muffle the alarm. He made a half-hearted attempt to silence it by pulling the leads off the backup battery. Since the device is hardwired, this just doubled the frequency of the alarm to include a backup battery warning. I grabbed my panel keys and went over to see if I could help my friend out. I was able to open the panel since I have keys for my own, and they're the same. The battery leads had been pulled off, but the main was still connected, so the beeper was going off like crazy. The manager didn't know enough to turn off the breaker in the electrical room, and I couldn't access it. The manager didn't answer the phone. Upon opening the panel, I immediately saw why it had been failing off and on for years, according to my friend. The batteries were 10 years out of date, and the leads on the terminals were blackened. It looked like the landlord had been swapping out the old batteries with new ones for the yearly inspection, then putting the old ones back in, and maybe returning the new batteries for a refund. Now I realize why the service call was scheduled so late, so the LL could get some temporary new batteries put in time. Now, I'm a licensed property manager, not an electrician, so it would be unethical for me to remove the hot lead from the bus bar to silence the alarm, but low-voltage wiring is a different story. Unfortunately, my insulated screwdriver slipped as I was tightening the battery lead back on, and I accidentally bridged the hot side of the bus bar with the low-voltage side of the circuit board. Luckily, my eyes were averted to avoid arcing injury, 120 volts right to the control board. Ouch! Big flash, breaker trip somewhere, and silence. The circuit board was toast. The service tech would have to install a new panel with new batteries. My friend contacted the landlord and reported that something had happened and the panel was silenced. Also, did he intend to provide a 24-hour fire watch until such time as the fire alarm system is fully functional as required by Section 6 of the Fire Code? He affirmed that he did not and that she could F off. Her next call was to the assistant chief fire inspector since she happened to have his business card handy. His response was much more gracious. He was happy to provide the necessary fire watch and contacted the landlord to inform him of the fact. The firemen's union is a strong one, and their hourly rate for emergency services like this are comparable to a midtown Manhattan law firm. I'm told the bill reached $3,000 before the landlord called the service tech to replace the annunciator panel. I'd like to say he also paid the $5,000 fine, but I understand he's fighting that in court. In the meantime, the building sleeps peacefully with a fully functional and up-to-date fire alarm. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.